coming down. I mean, you could visibly see it descending.
It was about 9:45 in the morning when Tricia MacLeod's attention was first drawn to a bright light in the sky. She was driving through Edinburgh when a huge moon-sized object came into view.
Just gone over the roundabout at the main Milton Road, and there was a very, very bright light in the sky, and it was very definite in shape. As I continued up this particular street, and down it came until it was really very near me. So I was sitting in the right-hand lane, about to turn, and it materialised into a spaceship.
Almost disbelieving her eyes, Tricia stopped the car and got out for a better look.
The only way that I could say I could describe it was it looked a bit like Saturn, but the ring that was going round it had lights, windows.
Once at home, though, she failed to persuade her husband that what she'd seen was real.
I came home, I told my husband, who's a local policeman down here, and he went into fits of laughter and said, you know, you don't expect me to tell anybody this, because I wanted him to phone up RAF Turnhouse and find out if there had been any reports of flying objects that morning.
As a respected international investigator and author, Timothy Good has read many UFO reports. 80%, he says, can be explained away easily, but the rest, stories of noiseless, strange moving lights, can't.
Some of these vehicles appear to be able to change shape, or at least to appear to be able to change shape. In my view, that could be related to a type of propulsion system which distorts not only space, but time as well.
On a November evening about 10 years ago, Linda Jones took a young son and daughter for a walk along a Manchester canal bank. Suddenly they saw a bright light in the sky.
It looked like it was going to hit us directly. We ducked into the grass. It landed vertically in a field over a hill. We ran up the hill. We thought we were going to see an aircraft in flames or something, but it was just this object. Total silence, not making any noise at all. It was then shaped like a half moon, really. Girder structure, the undercarriage of it. We stood there watching this object, transfixed, and we stared at it. It was hovering 2 foot off the ground.
It turned out that Linda lost track of about half an hour of time during the encounter. At first she told no one. Years later, under hypnosis, she recalls an experience on board the craft, but she doesn't like to recall it now.
I don't think I should remember. I think whoever blanked my mind out, or if it was fear that blanked my mind out, I do not know, but I know that I should not remember.
Tales of disturbing encounters are fairly rare. Skeptics say it's easy to be spooked by tricks of the light, for example, from low-flying aircraft. Most of the solid evidence for UFOs is collected by interested groups like Quest International. They say worldwide, millions of people are convinced they are real. Last year, a Skywatch team led by John Holman saw a UFO and filmed it.
As best my memory can tell, where this point of light had been, it was suddenly, its place was taken by a large sphere of orange light. It was perfectly symmetrical. There was no flickering to it. It was absolutely sharp in the black sky, which is the unusual observational aspect to it was. It was as if it was like a little planet had suddenly materialized in the sky.
The object only lasted for a few seconds before it disappeared, leaving the moon alone in the sky. John estimated that it was 3 miles away, hovering over a ridge.
Fortunately, we've got the moon in the same shot, which is very lucky. I've been through some triangulation, measuring the object off against the size of the moon. It measures just over half the apparent diameter of the moon, so it's quite easy calculation. And conservatively, it works out at about 70 feet in diameter. All 3 of us confirmed that had there been anything to structure it by, like a house it would have dwarfed, an average house.
This huge UFO is said to be a mile wide It's been seen over Puerto Rico, according to Quest's Director of Investigations, Tony Dodd. He says several US military aircraft have been snatched from the air.
Right, that is the main UFO which the people in Puerto Rico say is abducting aircraft. They reckon this UFO is over a mile across in size. That was a picture done by the UFO artist Jim Nichols from photographs taken in Puerto Rico. Can you put the next photograph on? That is not a very good photograph. It's actually a colour photostat copy of a photograph of one of these interceptions.
The Puerto Rico story has prompted much interest from UFO watchers or ufologists.
I'd like to ask you a few words.
When Captain Graham Shepherd came back from a tour of the area, they were keen to know his story.
The explanation of everybody that we spoke to was that they were craft of some kind from elsewhere. It seems to be moving, how can I say, up the agenda of awareness to the extent that nobody was prepared to claim that these phenomena were lights in the sky or Venus or geese or aeroplanes. They were quite matter of fact about the possibility that these were spacecraft.
Quest claims that the slides have been checked by NASA and shown to be genuine photographs.
Well, my own view is that they were seeing products of a very, very advanced technology, civilization, possibly. Their ability to change their flight characteristics, which are completely different from ours. For example, very large craft seem to be able to hover and to accelerate and to change direction at such a rate that completely defies what one might call our laws of aerodynamics and gravity.
Tony Dodd says there is other documentary evidence for military UFO contacts.
Well, I have a wealth of information which has come out where they actually talk on these documents about these UFOs being able to beat our defense systems, and on certain occasions have been known to land on American Air Force facilities. They got very, very worried about this at one stage because certainly every nuclear site, every site which had missiles, at one stage or other has been penetrated by these things. And it is very, very obvious they are watching what we are doing from the point of view of our building these weapons of mass destruction.
In 1970, the now deserted RAF base of Binbrook in Lincolnshire was active in the defence of the country. The base was home for English Electric Lightnings, fighter aircraft ready to be scrambled should any unknown objects enter our airspace. On Tuesday, the 8th of September, the alarm came. An American pilot, Captain Schaffner, was first in the air to meet the UFO, but he never came back.
From a military point of view, it's embarrassing to admit the existence of alien vehicles coming into our airspace against whom we have inadequate defense. There have been numerous instances involving aircraft UFO chases.
In his book, Ghost Stations 5, Bruce Barrymore Halpenny, a military historian, tells of a mysterious UFO chase. A retired RAF crash investigator, Mr. Halpenny, says it wasn't easy checking the story because of secrecy surrounding the case.
It was a normal, routine UFO sighting. When the alarm was given, Captain Schaffner scrambled his Lightning. And he was certainly a very experienced Lightning pilot, and he loved to fly the Lightning. He'd 6,000 hours on fast jets, a very, very experienced pilot.
This is Fire Squadron crew room, and it was here that Captain Schaffner, from this particular section behind the curtains here, this was the actual crew section that issued the order. From the door at the side, Captain Schaffner took the initiative to be first, and upon hearing that there was a UFO, he immediately took the few paces along here to his Lightning and was airborne within seconds.
Two other pilots were scrambled at the same time and sent out over the North Sea. Their job was to intercept a radar blip which refused to answer repeated requests from the ground to identify itself.
He reported that very bright lights. He was told then to proceed as close as possible, and which is what he was doing when he was enveloped with a very, very bright light. At that stage, he said that his aircraft was still flyable, but uncontrollable.
The close proximity to UFOs has produced very serious physical effects in the aircraft, and in some cases with the pilots. Communications are interfered with, weapon systems are interfered with.
Now at this stage, some malfunction with the lightning, so he's immediately withdrawn and instructed to ditch. The story then is that immediately he ditched and seemed to go down, the Ministry of Defence issued a statement that the aircraft had broken up. Then stories start to conflict left, right and centre. A security blackout is immediately put over.
Because of the design of the Lightning, ditching has to take place at sea. A dinghy is provided. Mr. Halpenny says that Captain Schaffner tried to eject, but the mechanism failed. On ditching, it's also possible to open the cockpit manually. A search and rescue team was sent. Captain Schaffner was never found.
The blip had gone off on the radar, whatever it was had gone. The Lightning floated for a short while and gently went down. It was sitting on the seabed. Perfect. There was no mark other than on the nose, and the aircraft was in perfect condition. And the canopy was closed. That's the sinister piece. The canopy was closed.
The Ministry of Defence say this was a routine low-level night flight and the aircraft came down due to pilot error. The pilot escaped on ditching, but was washed away by the tide.
The release is between there, and within a split second, he's gone. Should that not fire, there's also on the top manual, so that it is impossible not to have fired. So for him to be missing, the seat still intact, and the canopy on and closed, means the mystery was absolutely unbelievable.
All life on Earth depends on the sun, but it's just one of billions of other stars in the universe. If only a tiny fraction of those had similar planets, says the Royal Observatory's astronomer Harry Ford, there could be life elsewhere.
The elements for life exist throughout space. The different elements like carbon, iron, potassium and so on, they're actually manufactured by nuclear fusion inside stars. So the materials are there throughout the whole universe.
But that doesn't mean the universe is teeming with intelligent life. Even if there were other civilizations, the universe is so vast it would take millions of years for them to reach us. In any case, we would have detected their radio communications before now.
It would be stupid to say that there were no other intelligent beings out in space, but I'd love to see the evidence that they have actually visited. It seems a strange method of exploration. Can you imagine Captain Cook arriving at a South Sea island? He lands on the beach, he sees the inhabitants and immediately leaves.
Lack of concrete evidence has always prevented the Ministry of Defence from taking UFOs seriously. Ralph Noyes was a senior civil servant there. Part of his job was to deal with the public on defence matters, including the UFO phenomenon. The ministry line was polite, but dismissive.
I had a serious job to do with the air staff. They needed to have confidence in me and me in them. You didn't want to look like a flying saucer nutter. So it was always with a slight smile or a laugh that one would pop into Air Commodore so-and-so's office and say, look, we've got another bunch of sightings, several of them this time, up in Yorkshire or somewhere. We'd better have a look at them. Would you let my division know how we should reply to the kind people who've written? And the reply would come back, nothing we can see, doesn't look like any defence interest. That was the kind of reply the public got.
Most of the ministry's UFO reports have been destroyed. They say there's no evidence to support alien craft. At the Public Records Office, some documents, though, are available. Before 1967, the Ministry of Defence would generally dispose of any documents relating to UFO incidents after about 5 years. Since then, any documents are subjected to the standard 30 years secrecy. Nonetheless, amongst the thousands of files on display here at Kew, there are some that date from the 1950s, including this one from RAF Topcliffe. Here in this confidential Air Ministry report are several accounts of lights and objects seen over RAF bases. Like, for example, this report from the commanding officer at Topcliffe. He talks about all this occurred in a matter of 15 to 20 seconds. The acceleration was in excess of that of a shooting star. I've never seen such a phenomenon before. The movements of the object were not identifiable with anything I have seen in the air, and the rate of acceleration was unbelievable. And that's backed up, too, by letters from members of the public. It may interest you to know that the object that some of your officers saw recently would be true, as I saw the same thing on July the 26th. Another one, I should like to corroborate what the 10 officers and men said they saw in the sky on Friday afternoon. There are dozens more, from witnesses to strange sightings.
I think when one talks about the UFO topic, one's embracing an enormous range of things, a lot of misperception of astronomical things, weather balloons, what you like. Some of it is, I should think, sightings of advanced gear that's being tested.
For many years, the stealth fighter was denied by the Americans. Yet it must have flown for testing, and people could have seen it. The question for ufologists is, could such a strange craft be interpreted as a UFO? Quest's Mark Birdsall thinks secret testing could explain some sightings.
I certainly don't think it can explain everything, but I think if you look at the phenomena as a whole, especially from a historical point of view, most of the recorded observations of UFOs or flying saucers from 1947 to possibly 54 were of daylight discs and very, very physical objects.
UFO pictures from 20 years ago are generally simple saucer-shaped objects. They're metallic like round aircraft. So, could that be a clue to their origin? During the 1940s, Germany was leaping ahead with advanced technology. They pioneered the V-2 rocket. Yet Mark Birdsall claims their efforts were also behind an even more adventurous project, the V-7, an advanced circular aircraft.
I've been researching on the V-7 for something like 10 years now. We have contacted some people, some authorities who were willing to divulge at least part of the information. There are blueprints. We have, as I say, verbal sworn testimony that they actually witnessed the construction of the discs. Basically, we are looking at a circular aeroplane, and the sooner people accept that things like this exist from a UFO point of view, you know, at least if we have knowledge of our own capabilities, then we can progress further.
These blueprints came to light in a German magazine, Brisant, in 1978. According to the publication, this drawing was modified by the German government to make it safe for publication. Most experts agree the drawings are bogus, but the question remains, could they have been elaborate versions of a real original? This circular plane is just one piece of evidence which Mark has obtained to justify a German interest in the development of new aircraft. Over the years, several German publications, including Luftfahrt International, which specializes in aviation matters, have also documented the saucer story. They appear to be jet-powered aircraft capable of 2,000 kilometers an hour. Most of the work is credited to two scientists, Dr. Mieter and Rolf Schriever.
It is alleged that the Americans and the Soviet Union did actually capture one or two of these flying discs intact. There is some intelligence information that the Americans began a similar project.
It also turns out that in the 1950s, the Americans and the Canadians were also involved with a project developing a circular jet-powered vehicle. The Avro car was abandoned in 1959, but could it have been a precursor to highly advanced craft that could have been mistaken for UFOs?
The United States of America, Mr. Bob Dean.
On a visiting lecture tour of Europe, American Bob Dean addressed one of Quest's gatherings. Bob says he was involved in the military for over 23 years and had access to classified documents. He claims alien technology has been retrieved from crashed vehicles.
When this first began to happen years and years ago, from about 1947 on, our government and your government was involved with a cover-up because the evidence that they had collected was so frightening to some of the military people and some of the politicians that they made the decision that this information could not possibly be released to the public because the public was not sociologically or psychologically prepared for it.
There's speculation that at this secret military base in Scotland, the latest experimental aircraft, Project Aurora, is a regular visitor. Some UFO experts say features of the design are based upon alien technology. An expert in aircraft recognition, Chris Gibson, could well have seen it.
In August 1989, I was working on a drilling rig in the southern North Sea. When we looked up, we saw a formation of 4 aircraft. The lead aircraft was a KC-135 tanker. Off the port side of the tanker were 2 F-111 bombers. But underneath the tail of this tanker was a black triangular aircraft, which I'd never seen before. My initial reaction was it was an F-117 stealth fighter. But this aircraft was too big and it was far too perfect. Didn't have any wing surfaces or tail surfaces, pure triangle.
Hidden in the Nevada desert near Las Vegas is an American Air Force base. It's said that the Nellis base is used to develop all the latest military aircraft. This amateur video shot last year is of a frame-by-frame animation of a high-speed vehicle flying through the mountains. It was all shot by Ray Wardle.
The Aurora, I'd first seen that of a night time, and it comes in over Las Vegas, where it's very bright, but it looks just like a shooting star. And during the daytime, probably 18 months, 2 years ago, I set my camera up and filmed out at Red Rock Canyon area, which is west of Las Vegas. And I just let the camera roll. And when I replayed the tape, frame to frame, you can see these vehicles flying at probably 6,000 to 10,000 miles an hour in between the mountains.
This valley near Dumfries is a favourite training ground for NATO jets. It's also a good hunting ground for aircraft photographer David Anderson. On a walk near an abandoned airbase, he managed to take a picture of an unusual object in the sky.
Went for a walk down the old runway at Heath Hall. I noticed this object flying away from the centre of the cross. Took the camera away, looked up again, saw it again, and put my camera back up and started taking about 12, 14 photographs of it. And when I got back to the house, I told my family what I'd seen. They said, you better phone the Civil Aviation Authority. So I phoned them, and they said they would check up on it and come back on to me. So I took the film in to get it processed and came back home, and the police were in the house to see me, asking for any photographs, negatives or anything.
But he never saw the prints. The photographers who were developing the film said it hadn't come out. A few weeks later, they closed down. Military expert Mike Gaines doubts Aurora would have come to England, but it could have been made.
It's purported to be a high-speed, high-altitude aircraft, as I say, thought to be developed in the USA for strategic reconnaissance to take over from the SR-71 Blackbird. The US Air Force denies it. They might well be telling the truth, but there are other agencies in the USA which could fund such a program, specifically the CIA.
Just to give you an example, the American taxpayer pays $50 billion a year in what's called black budget programs. And most of that is in the UFO field. Getting these prototypes flying, trying to develop systems of our own, learning what we can about propulsion.
The specialist aircraft magazine, Jane's, recently published artists' impressions of what the craft could look like. It's said to be capable of 6 times the speed of sound.
I believe that there was probably craft captured, alien craft captured, or crashed or whatever, and we are trying to develop similar craft with earthly technologies and earthly metals and so forth So they're probably back engineering these vehicles. But I do believe that the ones which I've taped, anyway, are flown by either US military or the US government or whatever.
We asked Clifford Beale, an aviation expert from Janes, to look at Ray Wardle's film from the Nevada desert. Could it have been the secret Aurora project?
It appears to have a flying wing shape, which is different than what's been attributed to Aurora. I don't think this could be. Aurora is a high-flying reconnaissance aircraft. You wouldn't be testing it doing ground-hugging flying techniques. It could indeed be another secret aircraft undergoing testing. It's certainly in the correct area.
So have the Americans been developing a series of stealth-type aircraft which people could think are UFOs? And what about the stories of crashed alien vehicles?
It's true. We in the United States have retrieved several crashes. We've retrieved the hardware, and we've retrieved bodies, and in some cases we've retrieved living crew members.
Evidence to support the crashed vehicle hypothesis was found by UFO experts here, in these isolated woods owned by the Forestry Commission. Strange objects were seen over the forest by soldiers guarding the nearby military air bases of Woodbridge Bentwaters, jointly run by the RAF and the United States Air Force. Men at the base saw lights for 2 consecutive nights. On the first night, men reported lights inside the nearby forest, but no formal investigation was made. It was on the second night, December the 27th, 1980, that lights were seen again hovering over the end of the runway. At about 11 o'clock in the evening, Jerry Harris, whose bungalow overlooks the base, saw what he first thought were the lights of a plane, but he soon realized that it couldn't be, because they were on course to miss the runway and crash.
They weren't sort of nice steadies, they were moving about. So I undone the front door of the house and walked out into the yard here where I am now, and stood watching them. You see, and it's all quiet, and I listened. I couldn't hear any sounds at all.
Guards posted near the end of the runway also saw the lights and reported them to the base commander, who told them to stay on post. He would investigate. On the 13th of January, a surprising 2 weeks later, Colonel Charles Holt of the United States Air Force sent a memorandum of his findings to his superiors. It mentions strange glowing objects in the forest, depressions in the ground, and a craft that emitted red sunlight that pulsed.
I asked him, did he think it was one of ours, one of theirs, or Russian? And he said none of them.
Manchester solicitor Harry Harris has kept in touch with Colonel Holt ever since the incident. He even went to see him at the Bentwaters base.
Showed us a thick file of diagrams, drawings, statements by the various individuals and witnesses involved. And he also played a tape to us of a sound recording of part of the event, the UFO chase through the woods.
We found a small blast, what looks like a blasted or struck up area here. We got very positive.
According to Colonel Holt, this recording was made while he and some men went into the woods to investigate the previous night's sightings.
We're getting ratings on the tree you're taking samples from on the side facing the suspected landing site. What clicks, backs? That's the strongest point on the tree.
They're using instruments to check for radiation.
There's no clicks whatsoever. I see hot spots. This is strange. It's somewhat an abrasion or something in the ground where the pine needles are all pushed back while we get a high reading about the deflection of 2 to 3, maybe 4, depending on the point of it.
I sort of watched them, and they were going up, moving about this way and that way, and they were going up and they were coming down. And I sort of watched them for 3/4 of an hour. And all of a sudden, they disappeared. But just before they disappeared, there was a lot of activity on the base. I could hear vehicles running around. I could see the flashing lights of vehicles moving about.
It's thought that this is where the craft came down. At the time, it was heavily wooded, but storm damage has forced the Forestry Commission to clear the area. What happened that night may never be known, but with help from her co-worker, Dot Street, UFO investigator Brenda Butler decided to try and get at the truth. On the night, Brenda says, there's good evidence for a crash.
The tops of the trees were all knocked off. There was burn marks on the ground. there was depressions on the ground, you know, and very shortly after that, the Forestry Commission came in and knocked all the trees down, cut all the trees down really quickly. They told us it was because of radiation on the trees.
There's no doubt about it. There's some type of strange flashing red light ahead. So it was definitely coming this way. There's shooting off. There's no doubt about it. This is weird. So here he comes from the south. He's coming toward us now. I'm observing what appears to be a beam coming down to the ground. It's unreal. 3:30, and the officers are still in the sky, although the one to the south looks like it's losing a little bit of altitude. We're turning around, heading back toward the base.
It appears, now we know, that a team of about 3 security officers went out in response to visual sightings of this object crashing down and saw a small object about the size of a car manoeuvring in and out of trees and coming down close to the ground. They got so close to it at one point that one of them tried to climb on top of it and was literally spaced out by the experience.
Bufora investigator and author Jenny Randalls had the tape examined by audio experts in America. She says it wasn't a hoax made in a studio. Colonel Holt just acted on his own initiative and made a recording of the investigation.
Holt appears to have been as surprised as everybody else was. The British squadron leader who was in charge of the base certainly also was mystified as to why there was no follow-up by the Ministry of Defence, as to why this whole thing was basically left as it was. And this is the position we got in the letters from the Ministry of Defence afterwards. They told us that they didn't proceed with an investigation because they didn't consider it to be of defence significance. But how did they know that it wasn't of defence significance? That implies that someone somewhere in the upper echelons of government knew exactly what was going on.
30 foot in diameter, with 3 tripod legs coming down and lights beaming down with aliens, little aliens about 2 or 3 foot high in it, coming down. There's other ones who have described it as a shape like a shell, a big silver shape, and others have shaped like sort of like a tortoise shape. It has been like a tortoise back, with tiles on it.
The investigating team sent out in 1980 have long since left the Bentwater base. It may soon close down. After the incident, says Brenda, men were quickly debriefed and held to secrecy. Many were sent to other posts in America or even retired shortly afterwards.
What was peculiar about the Ministry of Defence's response was that they were asked as early in 81 what went on around Rendlesham. Were there not funny things seen on radar? Didn't something come down near this important base? And they said, no, nothing. And in effect, I think they lied, which in my day we didn't. We stalled.
They say they have no interest in the event unless it has a defence implication. They say it has no defence implication, but they haven't investigated it. They say they haven't spoken to the eyewitnesses, and yet the operational staff have satisfied themselves that there was no evidence of anything having landed or intruded. Well, Holt and his band of merry men were operational staff. So from whence did the Ministry of Defence get this information?
UFO investigators claim at the time our authorities denied having any information about the incident. But in America, the Holt document was obtained under the Freedom of Information Act. Even so, the Americans had lost their copy and obtained one from our Defence Ministry. So why the secrecy?
If you say nothing happened, were these men mad? If they were mad, why weren't they posted home? Whose finger is on triggers? That kind of awkward question would have arisen, should have arisen. And I think probably the MOD clammed up and actually got to the point of lying in order to avoid that embarrassment.
Some experts said Holt had been tricked by the lights from a nearby lighthouse. This he denies. By present technological standards, the space shuttle represents one of our biggest achievements in rocketry. Yet it's still a very helpless vehicle with only a limited propulsion system. However, some experts claim that the Americans have developed a totally new space vehicle capable of very high speeds. The evidence for this comes from the release of pictures taken from the Discovery space shuttle in 1991. That's according to American Richard Hoagland.
The sequence begins aboard the Discovery space shuttle.
rolled over on its side and flying wings forward into the pre-dawn darkness of September 15th, 1991. The shuttle is in orbit 355 miles above the Earth, just passing Rangoon, Burma, that brilliant collection of city lights below.
Discovery Houston, while you're looking at Orion, we're getting a pretty tremendous light show. We're looking at the lightning on the
These
Earth.
pictures are taken from a video detailing his analysis of the small objects floating outside the shuttle.
Now pay attention to your screen at the top center. You will see a dot of light appear and begin to move from right to left. Watch carefully. The dot will turn hard right in apparent response to a brief flash from the lower left. 3 seconds later, two contrails move sharply upward from the lower left. In my opinion, the NASA shuttle video you have just seen is among the most extraordinary pieces of footage in television history.
NASA claimed that the dots were no more than space debris or ice crystals similar to those taken from an Apollo mission. Hoagland says these look nothing like the objects seen by Discovery.
Our little dot is in fact drifting along at a leisurely pace of some 15 miles per second. That's about 54,000 miles per hour. When you see our little target object react to that peculiar flash, the undisputed star of our update accelerates in less than 2 seconds to over 200,000 miles per hour. And for those of you who may be wondering how many G's this little guy experiences when it accelerates in reaction to that flash, its numbers clock out at a cool 14,000 times the Earth's gravitational acceleration.
The object is a vehicle, but not alien, so it must be a secret weapon possibly based on alien technology.
This has led us to this amazing conclusion, that the shuttle cameras that night somehow showed us an active Star Wars weapon system in Earth orbit, and the system is using our own American hyperdimensional technology for target practice.
Years ago, UFOs were simple objects. Later sightings reported many lights. More recently, objects of a triangular shape have been seen. Could they be secret planes? Are people actually seeing extraterrestrial craft? Or is there some unconscious process taking place in the eyes of the witnesses, something that could convince these people in a Soviet republic that they're seeing aliens?
What's interesting about the development of the UFO reports, if you track it through time, because we now have about 50 years of reports where we can do that, is we can see that it follows what we call cultural tracking. It is exactly at the point where science fiction is predicting the technology of the future will go, but it's never beyond that level, which tends to suggest that it's something that we're perceiving which fits in with our sort of stereotyped images of what an alien craft should look like.
Hundreds of members of the Flying Saucer Observer Corps all over Britain, it's a serious search.
This archive film gives the tone from 30 years ago, as people described simple
One of
UFOs.
America's leading experts on holiday in Scotland recently is Dr. George Hunt Williamson of Great Western University, California.
I have actually seen the objects, and also I have seen many photographs of the objects, similar to this one, which was reproduced in Flying Saucer Review here in England.
They do become much more elaborate, and they do change with time, the types of UFOs that are seen. The current wave of UFO sightings, which is particularly popular around around Europe, is to see triangular-shaped UFOs.
5 days, a man was borrowed.
Now Hollywood has focused on the UFO phenomenon.
The story that Travis Walton and 5 other witnesses told was so unbelievable.
The feature film, Fire in the Sky, is the story of a real-life abduction.
Famous case of UFO abduction ever reported.
It happened to Travis Walton.
It does sum up the feelings, you know, that I went through. It's very hard to represent something visually that's going on internally, and so they had a problem. They were trying to bring this, you know, into something that can be seen.
You expect me to believe that a flying saucer came down and took your friend away to outer space
James Garner plays a role that many abductees will know well, that of a very disbelieving state investigator.
Story, you never even went back to the clearing, so you don't know, do you?
We all saw the guy get zapped.
You saw something. At least you thought you did.
You get this feeling of, you know, they've got these huge eyes, and they're looking at me in a way to where they just seem to look right into me. But then at the same time, without any hostility, it's indifference. When you sense that someone doesn't give a damn about you one way or the other, you know, that it's not somebody you're going to place a lot of faith in.
What the hell's he doing out there? Get back to the truck! What the hell is that?
Whether abductions are real or just some trick of the mind still hasn't been proved. Perhaps the most convincing evidence for UFOs can be found in Brussels, of all places. For a period of about 2 years, the whole country was affected by a wave of sightings. They'd been seen by witnesses, the police, and by local radar stations. The Belgian army was forced to take the claims seriously. They allowed their F-16 fighter aircraft to be involved in trying to intercept these UFOs. They had the full backing of the chief of the Belgian Air Staff, Colonel de Brouwer.
Initially, we thought that some of these observations were caused by atmospheric interference, such as weather conditions or electromagnetic interference. But later on, we found out that at certain moments, indeed, we could relate one visual observation with one observation on the radar. And of course, then we said, well, to have a confirmation, it may be very useful to have an additional observation from an aircraft.
The aircraft were deployed as part of a routine training program. Most times nothing was seen, except on one particular night.
The night of 30 and 31st March, we had an observation on the radar, and in addition, a visual observation on the ground confirmed by the police. We decided to send 2 airplanes in the air around midnight.
This video of the F-16's radar track of the object showed the performance of a vehicle of a totally unknown origin. The Air Force were at a complete loss to explain their findings. A press conference was called.
What these pilots detected was well outside the normal flying envelope of an airplane. Sometimes they had what we call lock-ons, which gave a parameters varying from speeds between 150 knots till 990 knots. An acceleration which occurred in a few seconds.
The Americans denied it was a secret spy plane, so could it have been the first official contact with an alien craft?
These speeds would be impossible to tolerate for a human being. That's a first point. A second point is the visual observations always describe a system, a machine, which hangs and hovers above the surface at quite a low altitude without making any noise. Now, with the current technology, that will be impossible.
So far, the Belgian authorities have refused to announce any official conclusion to subsequent investigations. Could it be the Aurora? Is it likely a UFO could have come from a faraway galaxy? After all, it took us 3 days just to get to the moon.
20 feet. 11 forward, coming down nicely, 200 feet. 4.5 down, 5.5 down. 100 feet, 3.5 down, 9 forward. Okay, 75 feet. That's looking good, down a half. 6 forward. 60 seconds. Lights on. Forward. Forward. 20 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. Big shadow. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. 30 seconds forward, drift. Contact light. Listen, the Eagle has landed.